I am here with the Fxtec Pro1 X, and I purchased this phone in November of 2020, and I recently received it in late April of 2023. So I've waited quite a long time. If you're interested in this phone, I'd recommend getting it secondhand from someone on eBay or some type of marketplace. If you get it from Fxtec directly, you probably are going to have to wait a couple months. I don't know how many months, but just a word of warning, if you're excited for this phone like I was in 2020, kind of reel in your expectations and either be patient or get it secondhand. Now, with that being said, I do want to go through and kind of highlight some of the features of this phone, some of them being negative. I think there are some not good design practices here, and then positive, some of the good things. So again, the biggest selling point of this phone is that it is, Fxtec, it is Pro1 X. It is basically, the two things that kind of drew me to the phone is that it's XDA developed, and it also has a physical keyboard. These are pretty much the two big things that drew me in as a consumer. Now, before we go into the positives, those two things I deem as positive, let's start off with the negative. So this phone was developed, I guess, originally in 2020. It ships with stock Android 11. Now, I cannot update to Android 12 or Android 13 with this phone. I could flash a custom OS, I could put Lineage OS, but you will get this phone with Android 11. Now, here's the thing, right? The Fxtec said that you could get this phone with Ubuntu OS, Lineage OS, or Android stock OS. I originally chose Lineage OS just because I was like, whatever, just give me Lineage OS so I don't have to flash it, make life easier. Ended up being the case that the phone would not ship with any customizable piece whatsoever at the earliest convenience. So right now, the only phones that people are getting are people who opted for stock Android OS, and they opted for stock Query keyboard. So one thing that you could do with the keyboard technically is that you could opt for a custom keyboard. Like instead of a Query keyboard, you could get like a QWERTZ keyboard or some other format, whatever formats they offer. But if you do that, they're not going to manufacture it right now. They're going to do it later. And God forbid if you chose like Ubuntu OS and a different keyboard, I have no idea when you would get that phone. I think it's kind of dumb that they didn't do everything at the same time. Like, who wants what, how many things to produce. I don't understand why this phone took 3 years, yet it feels like the process was kind of rushed. It's just very odd, especially considering that the original Pro 1 and the Pro 1 X, it's supposed to be like an iteration increase, it's supposed to be like an improvement. I don't know why it seems like this phone was like a ground up thing, especially with the Indiegogo campaign. I originally thought they did the Indiegogo campaign just as like a side project, like they would be developing other things and that would be like a standalone project. But as time went on, I honestly question and wonder why did they ever do an Indiegogo other than to say that they wanted money up front to do some type of investing. I have no idea. The reason why I mention this is to say that depending on the type of phone you order and depending on the type of keyboard you choose, OS you choose, you're going to be waiting longer, which is pretty whack. I changed from Lineage OS to Android just so I could get the phone a little bit earlier, and I did that change, I think, Q4 2022. No exaggeration. So after that, another thing that is pretty bad, in my opinion, is that they ironically didn't do a good job on the mobile keyboard. So the mobile keyboard is okay. It's stock Android, so it works as is. But the problem is that, at least for me, that when I use the mobile keyboard, I tend to touch this fingerprint sensor on the side here. This is the fingerprint sensor right there. And that fingerprint sensor also acts as like a refresh key for browsers. So if you ever have the palm of your hand, like palm of my hand just did right there, touch it, it refreshes the page. So if you were going to try to like Google something or look something up and you just type something in, the page refreshes. It's extremely annoying. And it's like you got to have your hand at a certain angle, a certain degree. And even then, like it's kind of hard to avoid, brushing up against it because it's not even like a button. It's like a very slight, any type of like movement over it will trigger it and it refreshes the page. There's probably a way to disable it. I'll probably look into that a little bit more, but I haven't changed it since because most typing I do with the physical keyboard. But really stupid, very bad design. I honestly don't even know what the point of having that side fingerprint sensor there. Like they could have done it on the screen like most other phones. It's whatever. Like I've seen phones where the fingerprint sensor is on the back, And I didn't even know that it was on the side until like I did the setup for the phone and it notified me of it. Another thing I will say that I don't personally like from a design perspective is all these buttons on the side. Like there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different sets of buttons. You have the volume keys, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. Then you have the lock screen key. Again, it's fine. I do not like the touchscreen button because it is taking away from normal functionality. And then this button all the way at the end is a camera button, which from a design perspective looks kind of cool. It's like, oh, okay, it's a little camera button. It's over here. But I never, ever, ever had a problem with the camera being a double press on the lock screen, and I actually prefer that personally. Maybe this is more subjective, but double pressing the lock screen is perfectly fine to me. Actually, looks like I just locked it. But yeah, usually just double pressing the lock screen will, pick whatever camera you want. I personally like that more. Maybe it's a subjective thing, but this button being here, it's kind of whatever. I just don't like it. Sometimes when you open the keyboard, you end up pressing it by accident. It's just kind of noise in my opinion. And then the camera itself is pretty mediocre. It's a 48 megapixel camera. Camera quality is kind of whatever. You can kind of even see it from this recording. I'm using my Pixel 7 to record this. As you can see here, the matte black doesn't really pop up. The different quality isn't really there. I would probably say that the quality of this camera is very, very similar to earlier OnePlus phones like OnePlus 7, OnePlus 8, very, whatever. I mean, again, this phone technically came in 2020, so, it's kind of hard to judge it considering that the hardware aspects of it are probably from 2020, and we're in 2023, but either way, that's what it has. Another thing is that, again, I noticed and mentioned that I have stock Android, but specifically the Android that I have is Android 11, and there's no way that you can update from the default, update method. If you want to flash Lineage OS, or if you want to flash a different OS on here, you could do that. I personally wouldn't want to do that myself personally. I mean, maybe I'll do Lineage OS now that I have stock Android 11. It's kind of whatever. I have Nova Launcher. It's not that big of a deal to me. From an aesthetic standpoint, I don't really care what it looks like. But you're not going to be able to have the latest security update. So I'm probably not going to use this phone as my daily driver because of the fact that I do have a work profile on my Pixel 7. I use it for work sometimes. I also have two-factor authentication hooked up with that work profile. So that's not something that's going to work because through company portal, it's going to look and see and say, hey, the security patch is from 2022. We're in 2023. What's going on here? You can't do that. So another thing to take into consideration, if this is going to be your only phone and this phone is going to be used for work, you're probably not going to be able to do that. And, just so you know, hindsight 2020, most work phones your company usually will not work with off-brand Android phones anyway. But the fact of the matter being that this is not even Android 13, it's never going to work because security patches are not there. So that's another thing to take into consideration. Other than that, other than those pretty big things, no work profile, no really good typing in browser with the smart keyboard or the phone tablet keyboard. And also the fact of the matter being that the phone's camera isn't great. I personally don't care about phone cameras that much, but I know for a lot of people that's a huge deal breaker. So really, when you look at this phone, what are the positives? For me, the huge positive for me is the physical keyboard. That's the bread and butter. That's the thing that brought me here. That's the thing that'll probably keep me ever using this phone ever again. I think they did a good job on it. I think that the physical keyboard is very similar to the Google G2 keyboard. I like it. I think that the only thing that I kind of don't like is that they have multiple shift options on the left here, and this is very nitpicky, but it's just something I'd mention that you can use the shift key and then any number to get a capital or any letter to get a capital letter. But if you use the shift key with numbers, it doesn't work. Nothing will happen. You have to use these alternate arrow keys, which is okay, but it was just kind of a weird thing that they added these two extra arrow keys. I do really, really like the caps lock that they added. The caps lock button is really cool. When you press it, it actually does turn green for on and off. It's kind of hard to see here. Actually, I don't think it even works really unless you have the phone on. Let me see. Let me go in the back. This is when you're touching your PC almost. And then let me see if I can use the fingerprint sensor. Fingerprint sensor, where are you? Wow, it's pretty awkward. Okay, there's fingerprint sensor. Okay, so yeah, when you touch the caps lock button right here, it actually turns on a little green light, and then when you press it again, it turns off. It's a pretty nice little touch. I like that. I'd say from a keyboard perspective, from a mobile keyboard perspective, again, it's similar to the G2. I would say it's not as good as the Sidekick 3 or Sidekick LX or even the Sidekick 5G. But then again, I think from a hardware perspective, this is better than the Sidekick 5G spec-wise, even though, you know, the phone did come out in 2020. It's older at this point. It still has pretty good specs, at least specs that are good enough to say that it's serviceable. In my opinion, a phone needs minimum 2 gigabytes RAM to be serviceable. As you can see, the display is about 6 inches, 2160 by 1080. Looks pretty good. The display is not as crisp and clear as a Pixel 7, but I'd say it's close to a OnePlus screen. It's pretty decent. It's okay display in my opinion. RAM you can get 6 or 8. I have 6 gigabytes. Storage you can do 128 or 256. You also have the option of using a micro SD card with the phone, and it comes with a slot for the micro SD card and the SIM card, which I think is really good. I think more phones, I kind of wish more phones did do that, because a lot of the memory that I use is on, you know, videos, pictures, things that you could just throw on a micro SD card. The keyboard, again, you can do query or QWERTZ or different variations of it. Again, you know, you're going to wait longer if you choose different things. And then the battery is 3200 mAh. Which is okay. I kind of like batteries that are like closer to 4000 mAh, but 3200 is serviceable. I think that's decent. I think my OnePlus 9 Pro was like 3500 mAh, and now the Pixel 7, it does pretty good. Point is, from the time that I used this, I could notice that the battery was pretty decent. It didn't die or anything like that in the day that I used it, so it's not too bad. Another thing that I'd say is a really huge positive is that they did a pretty good job on the phone's like thickness. It is very similar. Like the bottom half with the buttons is very similar in width and in width to regular smartphones, and then you have the top layer, which is the screen piece. Which is probably like half the width of most smartphones. So what ends up happening is that you have a phone that is approximately 1.5 width of what most other smartphones is. And just to give you an example, I have a OnePlus 9 Pro, which I think is as thick or as wide as most other smartphones. So we can use that for comparison purposes. And here it is right here. And as you can see from a side view, you can barely see it. It's kind of hard to see it from this angle, but let's see. Let's take this. Let's close the screen, make it all black. And if we just pick this up, as you can see, the thickness is okay. It's not anything crazy. Like when you have this in your pocket, you're not walking around thinking to yourself like, damn, I got a laptop in my pocket. It's pretty good. I think the thickness is fair. As you can see, the thickness of the OnePlus phone is very similar to the button portion of the Fxtec Pro1 X, and then you have that other portion of the screen portion on top that is about half the thickness of a regular smartphone. So from that design perspective, I think they did a really good job. I think it's really good that they did that. From an actual phone perspective, because yes, you are going to use this phone to make phone calls, and you are going to use this phone to make text messages. Positives, text messages works fine, SMS sends fine. I haven't seen any like lag issues or any like any SMS issues, which is pretty noticeable on older phones. Like for example, I had a Pixel 4, I think, or actually a Pixel XL that sometimes had like lagged messages, and that was a lot due to the fact that it was just older technology. This one seems pretty good, pretty decent. The times I did use the text with it. One thing that I did notice, and my friends did say, is that when I was using the phone for phone calls, that the audio broke up a little bit in the beginning. And I'd have to agree with that, because I called a Google Voice number. I think I'll upload this maybe at some point on the channel, for example. But I called a Google Voice number, I left a message, and in the beginning, the first 10 seconds was kind of crackly, and literally you cannot hear what I'm saying. And then after that, through regular conversation, you can hear the voice and it sounds fine. It's kind of unacceptable in my opinion. I mean, you know, this is a smartphone. It doesn't matter if you have all these bells and whistles on it. It needs to complete a phone call. It needs to be normal. And it's not T-Mobile. I have T-Mobile as my carrier. Works fine with my OnePlus phones. Works fine with my Pixel 7. It's this phone specifically where it has an issue with phone call. And one thing I will mention this. I think this is an issue that may be specific to my phone. But when I am listening to audio from the phone speaker itself, there is some popping and there is some like in and out audio. It's intermittent and it seems to happen every once in a while. So it might be some dust, it might be something, but I don't know. I blew it out with like an air canister. I still notice it sometimes. I'm just mentioning that to say that if you notice it, perhaps it's an issue, but I think it's just a one-off issue for me. And for me, I usually use the audio where that's not that big of a deal. It's very slight, but it is something that's noticeable enough to mention it. All those things being mentioned, you know, as I said, I feel like if you're looking at this from a buyer perspective, if you don't care about the physical keyboard, then this phone is a complete write-off. The software is not going to be as good as Google's phones. The hardware is not going to be good as other phones in terms of like OnePlus and their fast charging. I think that this phone comes very late. If this came in 2020 and it replaced my OnePlus 7, I'd be like, wow, this is a pretty damn good phone. But now that it came in 2023 and it has to rival the OnePlus 9 Pro and it has to rival the Pixel 7, you know, it doesn't even kick the 9 Pro out. I mean, the Pixel 7 is leagues above it in terms of software, camera quality, as well as just the screen in general. So, you know, this phone is going to probably be used for, you know, as a second backup, you know, Kevin Gates 2 phone type thing, but probably not going to be a daily driver. I mean, it's almost impossible to be a daily driver because I can't put my work profiles on it. I can't update Android, and I think that from a call quality perspective, most people would hate me if I called them and audio was breaking up. So it's a lot of negatives that come with this phone, and after paying $699 and waiting 3 years, it is not a good feeling to have this many issues that you find with the phone, especially within a week of use. I think that as time goes on, if Fxtec makes another version, they could maybe win back their consumer base because they kind of lost me, honestly, because I like Fxtec. I thought their Pro 1 was pretty cool. I thought the Pro 1 X would be literally an iteration forward. It would be an update to Pro 1. It would be some bells and whistles added, some quality improvement. But it seems like with the amount of time this phone took to produce, as well as the length it took to come to consumers, it seems like a ground-up project. I don't know why. I understand that this phone was developed in conjunction with XDA from like the software perspective, which I like that. It kind of harkens back to the original OnePlus days, but you know, if working with XDA, you know, proved that cumbersome or that troublesome, then that's not a positive. That's a negative. But again, I think Fxtec kind of jumped the shark with this one. I think that, you know, having a physical keyboard is not enough. I think coming this late, having Android 11, having a whatever camera, having these issues with the touchscreen, not great, not good. I think that, you know, looking at the Pro 1, if anyone owns a Pro 1, if it didn't, I'll tell you right now, if the Pro 1 did not have this touch bar on the side and the touch screen was like either on the screen or in the back, that's a huge positive, and I would say, objectively speaking, the Pro 1 is probably designed better. So just from that, you know, not a good look, not great, but you know, can't complain too much. It is a smartphone that has a physical keyboard. That's what I purchased it for, so it fulfills that hard requirement that I had. You know, when buying this phone, I would say, you know, I would say try to get it from a secondhand person on eBay or maybe in a marketplace, because one, you'll get it faster, and two, you might be able to get a deal off it. But you know, right now, a lot of mixed feelings with this phone, which is not a good thing when you just get a phone. You know, buyer beware. If you're hearing all this and it doesn't ring any alarms and you don't care, then go for it. But if it kind of damaged the luster and shine of it, then you probably should just wait for the next iteration if it were to happen. So that's pretty much it. That is the first impression. That is the kind of pseudo review of this phone. I like it. I do think it looks very nice. I think it was a very good I think it's a very good thing to exist in the space for smartphones, having a physical keyboard, having customized OS. I just think it's very bad from a business perspective where it took that much time to be produced. It comes out with older OS, it comes out with a meh camera, and also comes out with kind of some design flaws and things that really shouldn't be there. So I think that from an idea perspective, pretty good. From an execution and delivery perspective, pretty bad. Hopefully they can maybe do a better job in the future if they ever iterate forward one more time.